Greetings, friends! My name is Charles Q. Banks, and I would like to welcome you to my first ever movie review. Now, I used to be a film buff back in the childhood years of my adolescence and my youth. Basically, saying when I was young, I used to watch a whole lot of movies, and I enjoyed most of what I watched. And everything that I watched was monitored by my parents, and so I watched generally pretty good movies. I have a lot of favorite movies on my list, but recently, in between 2008 and 2012, I started losing interest in movies that were coming out in the modern day times. I still love classic movies from the 90s, the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. Not too many silent films because I'm very visual, but also very auditory. So I love movies with sound. But yeah, not so many these days. So I've not been watching that many recently because whenever I go to the theater, I almost always leave disappointed, or at least with a moderate level of disappointment. Because the last movie that I saw was It, the new horror movie, and it was a 7. It was okay. I was actually ecstatic to see a movie that wasn't just bland or boring. I even thought that, the latest Avengers movies were not that great. I was more excited to see it than the Avengers movies, which is pretty weird for myself because I'm a big superhero fan. Of course, that all being said, I also like Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage, if that tells you anything. But that's one of my guilty pleasures. So, maybe I thought this is just my own paradigm, my own mindset. I need to be watching more modern movies, and then I'll come upon some really good golden nuggets. So recently I was recommended a movie by Johnny Boy, and I'm also wearing his tie that he gave me, and he lent me Birdman. And this is the movie that I'm going to be reviewing for you today. This has received so much critical acclaim, and I'm here to tell you what I thought this movie actually deserves in terms of a rating. Because it has some pretty mixed reviews despite critics raving over it. So, what is this movie about? Well, I'll just read mainly from the back here. Michael Keaton delivers the best performance of his career. That's to be seen in this funny, frenetic film from co-writer-director Alejandro G. Iñárritu. When a has-been movie superhero risks everything for Broadway, he faces harsh critics, a deranged alter ego, his estranged daughter, and a difficult stage star. Also starring Naomi Watts and Zach Galifianakis. Birdman is audacious, original, and bold. So there you have it. It's a movie about movies and plays. Mainly about Michael Keaton's character, a washed-up, has-been actor who used to play as Birdman, and he's trying to create his own little masterpiece of a play based on a very poetic, philosophical book, and he just wants to be relevant again. He's very narcissistic, very arrogant and egotistical, but he's also very depressed, very easily depressed and discouraged by anyone making fun of him, and he always needs the affection and adoration of others in order to live life at all in any form of workable way. And so when he comes up against these really difficult other characters and their very strong personalities, they all butt heads, and it's very depressing, very, like they said in the back of this, very frenetic, and they try to be funny a lot, very sarcastic, but it's all extremely vulgar and crude. I knew a guy, my best friend actually, who was watching this movie with his family, and they watched 3 minutes in, and they turned it off because it was just too vulgar. And you can know 3 minutes in basically what this movie is going to be like. It's very artistic. It's a very poetic, like I said. It's very filmy. Like, they put a lot of art and artifice into making this movie a reality. and the directing is amazing. The acting is stellar. The nomination for Michael Keaton as Best Actor, he probably should have got it. He does this role justice 110%, and everybody gives 110%, even to being over the top. Some of these interactions are over the top and just too crude, too vulgar. I've never heard anyone speak in this way. And I know that people talk in crude ways and cuss at each other all the time, and they think it's normal, but I don't think it should be normal in a movie. This is rated R because of all the language in it, and there's some drug abuse scene in it. There are some sexual references and a weird lesbian scene that just comes out of nowhere. And it's all to tell you that Hollywood and Broadway sucks. And especially in this guy's life. Michael Keaton plays a very, very oppressed character. He's very narcissistic, but he's also very sympathetic. You can really feel his pain as he tries to get his family back together, as he tries to get this play together, and everything is just falling down around his ears. And it can be very deep at times if it went further than it does into certain themes. But it deals with all of these really deep, dark themes really quickly and without any real redemption or end goal in mind. It's just kind of, well, that happened and that was crazy, and can you believe that this is how Hollywood actors feel sometimes? It's very negative movie, like I said, very cynical, and there are some deeper things to be found here. It made me think. I'm very thankful for that. But other than that, it didn't do much for me. The critics loved this movie, but the people, while they didn't hate it, they didn't think it was enough for a 10. It's gotten a lot of different ratings from a lot of different people. Like I said, the critics all rave over it, giving it 8, 9, 10. And then the rest of the people like you and me, came out of the theater thinking, what the heck did I just watch? And why did that happen? And why is this going on? Why does this movie even exist? And the answer is, this movie exists to satisfy critics and film writers and playwrights and directors and people who have been through similar situations to this. It's not here to entertain the populace, because I personally was not entertained by it. It got really long at a lot of parts. I was not really into it for the majority of the movie, but I was like, okay, this got an 7.8 on IMDb, which is pretty high for IMDb. It got a 96 on Rotten Tomatoes. I am going to watch this movie. And a lot of people say, well, if you only watch the first 3 minutes, you're not going to get the whole experience. You need to watch it through to the end, man. The ending is amazing. But I say, if the journey to the end is not amazing, then why did I waste my time? You could have just shown me the ending. I'm someone who doesn't care about spoilers, and I love movies with good endings, but if the rest of it is just trudging through crap, then I am not going to enjoy myself. And this film is way too vulgar for its own good. It's trying to tell you that people these days think and talk with the F and A and B words as their go-to words. That everybody does it, and it's not unusual. And I think it's trying to be edgy, and that's something that I really despise in modern movies, is movies trying to make things edgy, like trying to make people say vulgar stuff, and just horrible stuff comes out of their mouths, and it creates tension, sure, because nobody likes to be called an a-hole, of course not, but that's like one of the only words in this movie, is you a-hole, and it's like, why did they do this? You could have made this movie great without all of that. And I think there are things about this movie that are great. Obviously, the Oscar nomination for Michael Keaton is very well deserved, and the direction was spot on for what it is. I didn't like what they did with it, but the fact that they were able to pull off such interesting ideas in terms of directing is really amazing. All of the shots look like they were done without editing. The entire movie looks like it wasn't cut, because there are these long cuts of just the camera moving into a hallway, down a hallway, moving into a room, going around the main character as he's monologuing, or, you know, you're hearing his thoughts. And then it moves out and around the building to someone completely different, and it shows their side of the story. And then it comes back around, and he's coming down the same hallway, and it never seems like it cuts. And it definitely does cut. That was a lot of movie magic. But magic, more like sorcery in my mind. But it did get cut, and there are less cuts in this movie on the whole than most modern movies have ever had. Like, very few cuts, which is very impressive. But in the end, what's it in service of? A very vulgar, crude, in my mind, unoriginal story about the greed and the drama and the tension that happens in Broadway and in Hollywood, and all of the bad practices that happen, and all of the things that get through. And the subtitle for this movie, if anybody didn't know, was The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. That's the subtitle. It sounds pretty pretentious, doesn't it? It is. I'd say this movie is very pretentious. It's way into itself, and that's how it feels the whole time. And it explores that idea that Hollywood is filled with jerks, and these jerks are really horrible people, but they give us the best performances. If we got rid of all of the worst people out of Hollywood, we wouldn't have anyone left, is what this movie gives you. And if we knew the intentions and the lives that lurked behind the scenes of these amazing movies that we love, then there would be an uproar. There would be rioting in the streets. We wouldn't have Hollywood as it is today. And that's the virtue of ignorance, is that we can see movies and enjoy them, and people can have horrible experiences making movies, but then on the other end, you come out with a piece of entertainment that a lot of people like, and nobody knows the horrible atrocities that went on behind the scenes. So, yeah, did I like this movie? No. Do I think that no one should like this movie? Yes. Do I understand why people like this movie? Yes. I think there are three types of people who watch this movie. Three different reactions to it. The critique's reaction, the artist's reaction, is that, oh, this has amazing writing, this has amazing directing, this has amazing shooting, this has amazing performances. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Then there are the people who hate it, people who don't understand it and can't understand the people who like it. People who are just like, this is stupid, this doesn't make sense, this is odd, this is vulgar, and I don't want to see this again. And then there are people like me who have both. I hate this movie because it's pretentious and it's going for what it's going for. I hate this movie in almost every respect, if not for the performances and those filmmaking techniques that they used that were simply incredible. And I can appreciate everything that the critics say that is good about this movie, except for the length. The length is too long. It was boring in a lot of places. The writing is off all the time. Really over-the-top performances by several people. It was obviously very vulgar, very unnecessary. I don't think this movie needs to exist. There are plenty of movies and stories that tell us about not being a greedy person, not being a horrible person, not going into Hollywood because of how Hollywood destroys you. And I don't think this movie needs to exist, but it is a piece of movie-making history, and thank you, Johnny Boy, for showing it to me. I did get stuff out of it, and this review is dedicated to you, my buddy. So, I give this movie a 5 out of 10, because does it do its job? Of course it does. It's amazing in many ways, but not in any ways that make me like it any more than any other movie in existence. Thanks for watching, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.